Welcome to this week's edition of Hockey Unfiltered with Ken Campbell. I am Dylan Waugh. I'm the sidekick. I am the Felix Unger to Ken's Oscar Madison. Today we've got a great show. We're going to be talking to Bobby Margarita, the original insider, the Bob father, Bob McKenzie. But before that, Ken and I are just going to talk about a few little news items, get them out of the way. Check us out on Twitter at Hockey No Filter, and check us out on YouTube. Like, review, subscribe, and also Apple Podcasts. I won't let almost forgetting Apple Podcasts stop me from making a great intro.
Oh, okay. That was great.
It
was really good, and it was only take two.
It was only take two.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, that's great.
Not bad.
And Oscar Madison, Felix Unger.
That was good.
It's good because you're the writer and I'm the guy doing the
and
the
I'm
nerdy
also
stuff.
the slobby guy too, probably. Yeah.
Well, and Felix
the
was
disheveled one.
Felix was he was a photographer.
Yes.
Right? And I'm running the cameras.
Well, good.
Yeah.
And you're making interesting charcuterie boards too here.
There is a butcher block, my friend.
That is
not for cheese, that is for a dead animal.
Okay, perfect. We got Bob McKenzie coming up.
We've got
How
Bob
do you like
McKenzie
that? Bob McKenzie.
I didn't believe you when you said you could get him.
Why?
Because most of what you say is bluster.
You know, he originally hired me at the Hockey
I do
News,
know
right?
that he originally hired you.
I remember the day I walked in for my interview. I came from Sudbury. I was working at the paper there, and
yep.
So he looks at my resume and he goes, "Yeah, looks like you're pretty busy." And okay, he says, we've got this little test that we give everybody, and so I drove like 5 hours to basically say hi and do this test, and then he offered me the job, so it was great. Best thing that ever happened to me.
I was going to joke with him. I didn't really get the chance to say it, but he said, 34 years ago, I hired you at the Hockey Writers. And I was going to say...
The Hockey News.
Or the Hockey News, pardon me. The Hockey Writers is a blog. The Hockey News. And I was going to say, biggest mistake of your life, because a mere 34 years later, he's going to be asking you to join his podcast.
Yeah. There's the payback.
There's the payback.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. No, Bob was great to have on, and he shared some insight.
He did.
He doled some wisdom.
He absolutely did.
He said some fancy learning.
He had his fastball, I thought.
Oh yeah, big time.
I thought he had his fastball.
Big time.
Yep.
So before we get into that interview, let's talk about Ristolainen, because I want to right a cosmic wrong here that I have done.
Okay. I
was under the impression, and it's sampling bias and it's my own stupid fault, but because of Twitter and all the rest of it, I was under the impression that everyone knew that Ristolainen sucked. And so I thought that he was actually, if anything, underrated at this point, because everybody thought that he was so bad. And I'm like,
right.
Well, he is still an NHL player.
Right.
He's just not. And so that's why I was, beating the drum of saying he's a decent pickup. He's a decent little pickup that won't cost you much.
Right.
5.1 million, Ken?
Yeah.
Is it 5 years?
Yep. 5.1 times 5, I think. Or is it 4? It might be 4, but either way.
It's a lot of money to pay for a guy that's has he ever looked good in his career? Has anybody ever watched him playing top line minutes and said, yeah, this is right. This is good.
Yeah. No, probably not.
Yeah. So tell me your initial thoughts on that contract.
I was surprised. I was really surprised. I guess I'm trying to look at this from Philadelphia's vantage point. They've kind of lost their way in a big way. And what are the Philadelphia Flyers? What are they? What's their identity?
Bad.
Yeah, other than that, yeah. So I get that they're searching for a bit of an identity. They want to be a little more difficult to play against. They want to be, they want to have that bite on the blue line, which this guy brings all of that.
He does.
But to me, those are the kinds of contracts. And I've said it before. It's not giving the $10 million to the Stars that kills you.
Yeah.
These are the kinds of contracts that end up crippling you.
Yeah.
in terms of your ability to do anything to get out from under the cap number, right?
Yeah.
Like I look at a guy like right now, I mean, Jack Eichel might be Vegas's best player.
Yeah.
He's been really good.
Yeah.
He's been really, really good since he got there, right?
Yeah.
So to me, it's not the Jack Eichel, it's not the Mark Stone, it's not the Alex Pietrangelo. It's the Evgeny Dadonov at $5 million. That's the one that kills you.
Yeah.
And I mean, they would love to move that contract somewhere.
Yeah.
And they might. They might. I could see a team like Arizona taking Evgeny Dadonov off their hands and Vegas taking half the money or whatever, some of the money, and giving something up big for that. But that's what it takes. And to me, it's those are the contracts that end up just killing you a couple of years down the road.
I mean, this, to your point, was Kapanen and Andreas Janssen, were they bad players? Like when they played for the Leafs?
No, they weren't terrible.
They were fine. They were fine middle six guys, right?
Yeah.
But all of a sudden you give them $4 and $5 million. I think Kapanen was 4.5 or something like that.
Yeah.
All of a sudden you give them $4.5 million and you set a level of expectation that you might not be getting back from them. Look at Joel Armia this year on Montreal. Like he's making $3.5 million. Now, if he was still making whatever he's making last year, 1.5 or something like that, then you just go, well, whatever, like life goes on.
Yeah.
But you're giving him big boy money and you expect him to play big boy hockey.
Yeah, exactly. It's actually 5 times 5.1. I was right about that. And Craig Button, who I know pretty well and is obviously a former GM and a man about town on TSN.
Yeah, he's known for his cold takes.
Yeah. He's always said to me, he said, players don't change, expectations do.
Interesting.
And that to me is what you get when you sign these contracts. The player doesn't change.
Yeah.
Bobby Holik, when he signed with the New York Rangers for all that money, was still a third line centerman.
Right.
That's what he was. He wasn't instantly going to be. And I mean, you've used this analogy a lot
with goalies.
It's just because you sign a guy to a $10 million contract doesn't mean he's a $10 million goalie.
Yeah.
And so the player doesn't change. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if they're expecting Rasmus Ristolainen to all of a sudden become the second coming of whatever, Chris Pronger or whatever. Because he's not.
Yeah.
He's not. He's going to be what he is.
Yeah.
And you could argue he's going to be worse as the contract moves along here.
Yeah.
But they're looking for something. They want some identity. They want someone to be the alpha male, I guess, when Claude Giroux moves along. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it was that one was a big head scratcher. They gave up, and then you get to where the GM's like, okay, we gave up Robert Hagg. We gave up a first-round pick. We gave up a second-round pick for this guy. We only had him for a year, and then if we let him go for nothing or we trade him for futures, how's that going to look? Yeah.
Yeah. Bob McKenzie brought up the idea of Ben Sherratt, not to give away too much, but just as a little teaser, and how he is a good addition to an already good team.
Yeah.
Like you couldn't build around him. And that's how I've looked at Ristolainen through this, as if you've got a good team, much like when the Tampa Bay Lightning brought in David Savard for last year's cup run.
Devin? Did you call him Devin?
That's David.
Oh, David. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. David. Yes.
Much like Davey Savvy Boy.
Yeah.
No, much like when Montreal brought in David Savard. Tampa Bay. I was on a good train of thought until you ruined it.
Sorry.
It's not that they were trying to build a defense around him. They were trying to complement an already good defense.
Exactly.
And that's what I expected with Ristolainen. But at $5.1 million, that's a top pairing expectation.
Absolutely.
Right? It's not 8, but it's not nothing.
What do they do? What are they going to do? Ivan Provorov has kind of cratered.
Yeah.
They're not in a great spot.
Yeah.
They're not in a great spot.
Yeah. So moving from one not great spot to another not great spot, Mathews suspension. Did you want to talk at all about that before we move on to Bob McKenzie?
Well, to me, I want to talk a little bit about Colorado too, but
Yes, pardon me.
Yes, pardon you. I mean,
they're under the subject heading anything else question mark, which you could have filled out, but whatever. We'll just leave it there as anything else question mark.
A little passive aggressive today, are we?
Listen, if you could just do that, that'd be great.
So
don't touch my stapler.
Okay, Dwight.
That's Office Space.
Oh, Office Space, not The Office.
Not The Office. That's Office Space with Stephen Root.
Yeah, I'm unfamiliar with that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It's like this one employee.
Let's not go down a rabbit hole, Dylan. Let's stay on course, okay?
I've got the screenplay pulled up right here.
Okay, so Auston Mathews 2-game suspension, totally deserved. Totally deserved. 100% deserved. Should have gotten like bare minimum two games.
Yep.
What he did, dangerous.
Yep.
Those are the kind of cross checks that when you get them repeatedly over your career, it's really bad.
It doesn't matter if it's a concussion. It matters that it's repeated trauma.
Yeah. And I thought he deserved at least a 2-game suspension. I have no problem with him having a 2-game suspension. I think you have to separate the two issues. The one that he doesn't get any calls and this. And I think they're related because I think that was just a tipping point.
Yeah.
He hits Dahlin with a pretty clean hit.
Yeah.
Dahlin comes back, pushes him into the net, gives him a going over. And finally, I'm sure Auston Mathews is going like, screw it. I'm not taking this anymore. I just got pulled down by Jacob Chikrin in overtime with no call. I've drawn 6 penalties this year. Radko Gudas has drawn 21. What's that?
Ovechkin.
What?
Got that hooking. It was Ovechkin hooked him in overtime.
No, that was Zach Hyman against Edmonton. No, it was Jacob Chikrin against Arizona. They were tied 4-4. Jacob Chikrin held his stick and held him.
Oh, that's right.
And then Jacob Chikrin went in and scored the overtime goal.
But Ovechkin also hooked him in another overtime a week ago.
You're thinking about Zach Hyman. That was against Edmonton on the empty net. Anyways, I don't think he did. No, he didn't. In fact, I'm sure it was Zach Hyman. Look it up.
Go ahead.
Anyways, I'm sure he finally just said, "I've had enough. This is it. I've got to make a statement." And you know what? I argued that this suspension is going to cost him $100,000, $116,000, 2 games. It's definitely going to cost him any chance he would have ever had at the Lady Byng Trophy. But he would have had a chance.
No, but I'm just wondering if he cares.
Yeah. No, he probably doesn't. But he had 10, 12 penalty minutes. I mean, he would have been right there. So it costs him all that, but I think it's probably a good investment in his career because, as I said, as sure as the sun sets and rises, he's going to start getting calls. I guarantee it. He's going to start getting more penalty calls because that's the way the NHL works.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully, like this, and this is the thing: is that I'm a firm believer in that the no harm, no foul idea is one of the most detrimental things to sports, and it makes people get away with stuff. It's just like I've never understood why one person drives drunk and they get a license suspension, but another person drives drunk and hits somebody and they're in jail.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, they made the same error.
Yeah.
They made the same error in judgment and they both drove drunk. And it's just pure luck that somebody didn't die with this person and somebody did die with that person. Right. So I think that these things need to be called. I always go back to the Paul Byron hit on Mackenzie Weegar 2 years ago. Byron left his feet. Small guys leave their feet a lot. You can pretty much take it to the bank that a guy that's played as long as he has in the National Hockey League, like Paul Byron, and never done anything like that, it wasn't malicious. With Mathews, maybe it wasn't directly aimed at the head. I'm not making that argument. I'm just saying that even if it wasn't, or whatever the case was, your head. If somebody's stumbling, your head's not like, oh, it's okay, I'm not going to endure trauma because he was falling and didn't mean to hit me in the head. Right. And so at the end of the day, the suspension needs to be placed. And like I said with Paul Byron, and like I'm about to say now, I just hope that it actually sets a bloody standard.
Yeah. Oh no, because the wheel of justice landed on 2 games.
Yeah.
That's what happened. The wheel of justice landed on 2 games.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I see, I don't buy the whole, it wasn't malicious. I wasn't trying to, like, come on. Did you see the look on his face? He was pissed. He was pissed.
Yeah.
And like, what else are you trying to accomplish when you take the shaft of your stick and drive it into someone's neck?
Yeah.
What are you trying to accomplish? Oh, I didn't mean to hurt him. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So
well, maybe he was trying to drive it
you?
into his shoulders or something like that. But at the end of the day, if you're responsible for a high stick and you're responsible for a trip, even if you touch the puck first, like it used to be, if you touch the puck first, then there's no tripping.
Yep.
If you're responsible for your stick for a trip and you're responsible for your stick for a high stick, then whether you're on balance or off balance or whatever the situation is, if you're cross-checking a guy and it goes into his neck,
well, you have to live. You have to live with the consequences when things go sideways.
Yeah.
You know, you have to.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's that. Yeah. So, yeah.
Totally agree.
Yep.
Colorado Avalanche, before we get to the Bob McKenzie interview.
Yeah, interesting. Made a couple of interesting moves.
Correct.
Moved out some money. Tyson Jost was at $2 million, and I think Nico Sturm's at $750.
Yeah.
So they've cleared up a 1.25 there. They brought in Josh Manson, which I think is a really good move.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a little bit too much Jack Johnson and Curtis McDermott on that third pairing. And you don't want too much Jack Johnson and Curtis McDermott. And you definitely don't want it in the playoffs. So I like that move. Interesting to see what they're doing. You know, a lot of people aren't saying they're finished yet. You know, everybody's still circling back to Claude Giroux and how he ends up somehow, ending up in Colorado. Which I mean, when you're clearing out that 1.25, you go, maybe there's something to that.
Do that one more time, and then maybe one more time, and
I mean, they have no picks. They have no picks to give up. They do have some pretty decent young guys. You know, they've got obviously Justin Barron, they've got Shane Bowers, so they do have some chips to play. So we'll see where that goes.
Yeah, and I mean, does Philadelphia want to pick? I mean, obviously they want to pick, but I'm just saying, like, in terms of getting rid of Claude Giroux, would they be happy with a high-end blue chip prospect?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And especially with the idea that Philadelphia probably does not see themselves as being in this situation again next year.
I don't know. They're not. Yeah. Well.
I mean, you're not wrong about that. But signing Ristolainen, going back to that that contract, signing Ristolainen suggests that they think that they're building something around what they have, which is crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, here's the thing, right? We talk about this all the time privately. Sports is an entertainment industry, and teams just biffing it that bad. Like, what could be more entertaining? And yes, I'll be more than happy to get dunked on if it turns into the best thing in the world and the guy wins the Norris next year and all the rest.
I think you're okay.
Yeah,
I think you're okay there.
I think I'm probably pretty safe. Eh? But yeah, in terms of Claude Giroux, if Claude Giroux does find his way to Colorado, which of course he's been rumored to Colorado for so long, and my thought is, how do the nuts and bolts work? But now it looks like Colorado's making some of the nuts and bolts work.
They're not done. They're not done.
No, they're not done. But this is closer than I thought that they'd get. Do you think that, like, Colorado just basically, you just hand them the cup?
No.
No.
And because, I mean, Tampa's still there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of teams.
Yeah.
There's a lot of teams in the East, and I don't know how you get through the East, but whoever does end up getting through, I don't think you hand them the cup yet. They've got to prove it. They've got to prove it. Nathan McKinnon's got to do it in the playoffs. They've got something to prove. They've got something to prove. No, you don't. No.
Fair enough.
All right. Let's get to Bob.
Let's get to Bob.
Sounds good. Hello again, everybody. Well, it's not every day you get hockey royalty on your podcast, and we don't have that, but we do have the original TSN insider, the original TSN draft guru, the former editor-in-chief of the Hockey News, the former beat writer for the Sioux Greyhounds and for the Sioux Star, and now booze mogul, Bob McKenzie. Bob, thanks for joining us. I appreciate it.
Hey, Kenny, how you doing?
I'm doing okay. It was funny when Dylan was asking me, what media guys do you think you could get on the podcast? And I was like, I could probably get Bob McKenzie. So he got very excited. And I said, yeah, I'm pretty sure I could land him, Yeah, I'm pretty sure I could get this one. After all, he hired me like 34 years ago.
Dylan's excitement may be dissipated as we go through this show. You may be at the end of it saying, wow, that was pretty bad.
I think we're good. I think we'll be okay. Anyways, Bob, so let's deal with the important stuff first. When I ran with you, the few times that I did run with you, you are always a rum and Coke, lots of ice, twist of lime guy. Rum and Diet Coke, lots of ice, yes. Twist of lime guy. Apparently that has changed in a big way. Tell us a little bit about your venture and what you're doing with Bobby Margarita.
Well, if you were looking at the evolution of my drinking habits, you're right. It was always amber rum, Diet Coke, large glass, lots of ice, twist of lime. And then over time I matured and I became a red wine drinker, and I do love my red wine, and I do still drink a lot of red wine. But the funny thing about the whole margarita thing is that, I used to occasionally drink a margarita. I think the first time I had a margarita, I was probably in Dallas covering the Stars at the beginning of their tenure there. And a bunch of us, as you know, media people are wont to do, we go out for dinner and drinks. And we went to a Mexican restaurant and had pictures of margaritas. And that was probably the first time I ever had one. I go, I kind of like that. But it wasn't something. Margarita is a fairly labor-intensive exercise, and even 5 or 6 years ago, I bought a margarita maker, a frozen concoction maker, and stashed it away. It was during the playoffs. I bought it, and then it came to the summertime, and I cracked it open at the cottage and said, "Let's fire this thing up." And I had to go online and figure out what exactly goes into a margarita. So I find out that it's tequila, it's Cointreau or triple sec, it's lime juice. It's sugar or simple syrup, and you mix it all up. And I did that in this blender concoction maker thing. And
that was the Martha Stewart recipe, right?
That was the Martha Stewart. Yeah, very basic Martha Stewart recipe. And did it.
That one will land you in jail.
It's a good thing. It's a good thing.
Exactly. It's been done wonders for her career. So she's best friends with Snoop Dogg now. So what can I say? It's a little hard time. That doesn't hurt anybody, I guess.
Exactly.
But in any case, that was the genesis of Bobby Margarita, because I videotaped the blender going and me drinking a margarita on vacation, and changed my Twitter handle to instead of Bob McKenzie, it said Bobby Margarita. And people got a kick out of it. And one thing, it snowballed. I leaned into it, they leaned into it, and then ultimately my son Sean and I, through a guy by the name of Brock James that he knew from his days in London when Sean was going to school there, who works for the Ace Beverage Company now, we came up with the opportunity to do a ready-to-drink margarita. So instead of all that trouble of getting the tequila, getting the Cointreau or triple sec, squeezing the limes, getting the simple syrup or the sugar, and mixing it all together and pouring in everything else, we duplicated the taste of the margarita that I like and put it in a can. And it's been very exciting. And it launched in December in Alberta, Nova Scotia, around Christmas. We just recently went into Saskatchewan and New Brunswick. And I'm very excited, being a born and bred Torontonian Ontarian. The LCBO, that was where we first got approval. Last Labor Day, we found out that the LCBO had approved the listing for Bobby Margarita. And it's now, in the next number of days, if not weeks, and certainly by the end of the month, it'll be in 160 plus LCBOs in Ontario. And in April, it'll go to many more than that. So it's going to be widespread distribution, and pretty excited. Bobby Margarita comes to Ontario.
Yeah, I can imagine. And it's funny how these things start, right, Bob? Like, I mean, just the most innocuous thing that you did after a vacation. Then your son sort of goes, "Hey, Dad, I think maybe we can probably capitalize on this a little bit." And it starts out as, "Yeah, let's sell some T-shirts for charity or something." And then it becomes this, so it's crazy the way things sort of get going in life, right?
Yeah. We'll see where it goes. Yeah. it's a lot of fun, and it's been exciting, and it's been busy too. Though, like I'm supposed to be semi-retired, and suddenly I've got this fairly full plate promoting and selling because. And Kenny, you know me pretty well. I'm in this partnership with the Ace Beverage Group, and they are fantastic. They do Cottage Springs, they do Ace Hill. You know, in Ontario, they're I think number one in terms of producing ready to drink cocktails, and they're just fantastic to work with. But I am not a silent partner.
No,
you know, myself and Sean, we were involved every step of the way. So whether it was the color of the can design, the liquid that's in it. I mean, we did 3 separate tasting panels and probably 2, 4, 6, probably 15, 16 versions of the liquid before we settled on exactly what we wanted. Because you know what, if I'm going to put my name on it, some people, I guess, do licensing agreements. A famous person or somebody who's well known has a profile might say to a booze company or a wine company or something, slap my name on that,
slap
whatever.
My name, yeah.
And away we go. And I can't do that because if it's got my name on it and it's part of me, it's got to be exactly the way I would want it. So if you like it, then you could say that's great. If you don't like it, then you could say, well, that's okay because that's the way Bob wanted it to be.
And he also wanted it, and it's very important, he also was insisting that it not be carbonated. So
that's correct,
that was a big thing for you, and it's a big thing for a lot of people because carbonated beverages make you burp.
Well, aside from that, I drink lots of carbonated beverages, but a margarita by nature is not a carbonated beverage, right? And the two primary ready to drink margaritas that are in the market in the LCBO are both carbonated. And so it wasn't where we looked at it and said, oh, they're carbonated, we don't want to be carbonated. I was like, oh, I guess I could drink a carbonated margarita, but for me, it's not really a margarita. It's more like, I think, trying to capitalize on the whole, hard soda, seltzer, vodka. There's like about 1.6 million vodka sodas on the market right now.
1.6
million. And so I just wanted to make sure that the margarita you get out of the can and Bobby Margarita tastes very similar to the one I would mix up myself. Having said that, I mean, when you mix up a margarita, the alcohol content's got to be up around 10, 15, 20%. By the time you put in, you put in the tequila, you put in the Cointreau, there's a lot of alcohol in a margarita. And thankfully, the Ace Beverage Group were able to duplicate the taste of the margarita that I like and do it for 5% alcohol, same as a normal beer.
Yeah, so it's like having a beer.
And a calorie content, caloric and sugar that's not off the charts. Because that was important to me too, because, if you got 30, 40 grams of sugar in this thing and it's, 300 calories a pop, you're going to have one of those, you're going to put it down. You can have multiples of these.
and there's going to be a lot of hockey fans that'll be interested in drinking this. So you don't want to, like Bob McKenzie made me fat because I drank too many Bobby margaritas. So anyways,
I was fat before I started drinking margaritas, by the way, just to point that out.
You're looking great, Bob. Anyways, I wish it were available in Ontario right now, because if it were, I would have one right now and I would be day drinking right now as we speak. But alas, it's not. So I'll have to wait until the end of the month to get my hands on one, but I'm looking forward to that. So let's get to the hockey stuff, guys. Dylan, you are going to ask the hockey related questions to Mr. McKenzie. So take it away.
Well, Bob, I think I speak for everyone when I say it's a good thing that you don't have that much sugar in, because that leads to a huge hangover. Speaking of huge hangovers, the Toronto Maple Leafs. Perfect segue.
You have to win something to have a hangover.
They've got a hangover since '67. So the 60s was a crazy time, as we will probably be discussing later. Dubas has been saying publicly that he's not searching for a Jake Muzzin replacement. But he also seems to be picking those words carefully. I'm not searching. I'm not going out of my way. My question is, do you think that his plans have changed with the continued losing? And if so, who do you think he's targeting? And Bob, we'll start with you on that.
Well, first off, Dylan, the first point I need to make is I always get billed as the hockey insider. Since I've retired, I'm now officially the hockey outsider. And so, honestly, I've not watched a lot of hockey this year, but I'm working Trade Center at TSN on Monday. So, like the Ryerson student I used to be that never went to class, but still turned up for the final exam and passed it. Not necessarily with flying colors, but I bluffed my way through many exams where I didn't go to any of the classes. That's what I'm going to do this week and on Monday. And I'm fortunate enough to be able to sit beside the smart kids in class, Darren Dreger, Pierre LeBrun, Chris Johnson, and cheat off their paper. So I will in advance give them all the credit in the world for a lot of the stuff that I'm stealing from them. I'm going to pass off as my own information here today.
That's okay. That's okay.
So now, getting back to your question, first off, Kyle Dubas isn't looking for a Jake Muzzin replacement. He's just looking for another defenseman. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Muzzin, by the way, has been ramping up his skating every day. Mm-hmm. He's not eligible to return to the Leaf lineup until after Saturday. But I don't think, as long as there's no setbacks the rest of this week, I think he's going to be back in the lineup sooner rather than later after Saturday. And I think, a lot of people were upset because the Leafs didn't LTIR him, and which would have given them the flexibility to go out and add even more at the deadline and, do what Tampa did with Kucherov last year, bring him back in the playoffs and say, here you go, ready to go. And we've added another piece. There's no salary cap in the playoffs. But I think in the case of Muzzin, he wasn't playing. He hasn't had a great year. Not as good as he's capable of playing and not as good as he played in the past. And I think the Leafs probably felt like we owe it to this guy that if he is healthy coming off the concussions, back-to-back concussions, to give him as much time as he needs in the regular season to get his game. I don't think it'd be fair to him or the Leafs to pop him back into the lineup on the first day of the playoffs,
right,
and expect him to go in and be a shutdown defenseman for them, especially when he hasn't played as well this year as he has in the past. So I think the Leafs are hoping that the more he plays down the stretch, the more chance there is that he's going to elevate his game back to where it needs to be. But quite aside from that, they're looking at their blue line, and they added Lyubushkin, and I think they're really happy with him. But they really feel like they need another piece. And, and it's got to be, they don't need any more smallish puck movers. They don't need any more medium-sized puck movers. They need somebody who can defend. They need somebody who can play with some bite. It would be nice if it was 6'4", but I don't think they're hung up on size as much as they are competitiveness and ability to play against good players. So one of the names that's out there a lot, and there's a lot of teams talking to San Jose about him, is Jacob Middleton. And he plays with a lot of bite, and he's really elevated his game. He was before, when he first came into the league, he was sort of a bubble guy, and you thought, a 6 number, maybe he's going to be a 6 or 7 for his whole career. But he's played some significant minutes in the top 4 for the San Jose Sharks. So there's multiple teams, including the Leafs, that are looking at him. So that's the type of player that they're after, and I think that's their priority, maybe more so than a goaltender.
Well, what about Mark Giordano, Bob? I mean, he's another name that I think is out there, and he seems to be the flavor of the week anyways. And I did want to talk a little bit about Toronto's goaltending in light of what happened last night with Erik Källgren. Stopped 35 shots. It didn't have it wasn't a high event game. I think in large part because he didn't make it a high event game. He was pretty good. He was very, very fundamentally sound and all those things. And I got to thinking afterwards, funny things happen. And we talked about it with Bobby Margarita. Funny things happen out of the most innocuous things, right? 3 years ago on January 7th, 2019, a 25-year-old Jordan Binnington got a shutout in his first NHL start, right? Nobody at that time There's not a person on the planet at that time who thought, this guy's going to go on some kind of heater, and the Blues, who are in last place right now, are going to go on even a bigger heater and go on and win the Stanley Cup. So, I mean, why not? Why not give it a try? I mean, obviously, Peter Mrazek is not the answer. He just isn't. And I'll go back to what the people in Detroit used to call him, and their management team used to call him Peter Erratic. He is like that. Jack Campbell, we don't know. I mean, if Jack Campbell would have had took his October, November, and part of December and moved that to May, June, and early part of July, the Leafs could win the Stanley Cup. But we don't know that. To me, I think it's like, okay, so let's see what we have in this kid. I mean, 51 years and 2 days ago, a 23-year-old goalie by the name of Kent Dryden beat Pittsburgh 3-1 or something like that. He stopped 34 shots. I don't think anybody thought any of that was going to happen. So, you know what? Why not?
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know a lot about Shalgren. As I say, I'm the semi-retired outsider now, and that. But from what I understand, he's got some pedigree in terms of what he did over in Europe and won a championship there. And so, as you say, why not? And plus, I mean, right now it's any port in storm, let's be honest. And that's not to say the Leafs aren't talking to other teams about goaltenders. They are. Because I think, quite aside from the short-term concerns from now to the end of the regular season, from now and then into the playoffs, I think the Leafs are looking at it and saying, okay, well, what are we going to do in the next year, the year after that? Maybe Joe Wall's the answer. I don't know. Maybe Shalgren's the answer. I don't know. But if there's a goaltender deal to be made where you're getting a goaltender who's under contract for the next 3, 4, 5 years, and you think that person is worth it, then maybe that's more the kind of goalie deal the Leafs would be looking at. Very, very
John
difficult.
Gibson. John Gibson
I don't know why his name's starting out again. I'm not on the beat 24/7 here.
Yeah,
but I've anecdotally on social media seen a little bit of what about Gibson and what have you. And I don't think he's had the year. He's not on. He's had a bad injury history, but he's a very good goaltender.
Right.
He's got a chance to continue to be an elite goaltender, I think. But I don't think, from what I've seen this year, or from what I've heard, he's not right on top of his game. But the point I'm trying to make is that short-term fixes in net that are available in the trade market now, the acquisition cost, the goaltenders and who they are and what they've done. Goalies, it's like a voodoo position. I mean, outside of 2 or 3 guys in the National Hockey League, it's like a stock market. It's like it's up, it's down, and they're all over the place. If you're looking for consistency in net, it's really hard to find.
Yep.
And that. So, anyways, I think the other thing with the way Campbell's game went south post All-Star, maybe it was just fatigue. Maybe he had he was one of the great stories, let's be honest, in October, November, December. Really nice guy, and who was expected to do so much in the NHL and did virtually nothing. And then all of a sudden, once the expectations were gone, he fashioned this incredible scenario where he was perhaps a number 1 goalie in the NHL, and was full value for what he was doing prior to the All-Star break. And then since then, the wheels have fallen off. Maybe it was just fatigue. Maybe, or maybe he just doesn't have the staying power. I don't know. But this injury could be a blessing in disguise in terms of giving him the time to reset, get a mental break, a physical break, and kind of come back at it the other way. And if they can tread water with Shalgren and Mrazek, and try and get a healthy Campbell in, it's conceivable that the deadline could go by on Monday and the Leafs don't make a deal for a goalie, because I think it's a tough needle to thread.
Yeah, and I mean those, the John Gibson deals. I always call those like fantasy hockey deals. Mm-hmm. You got these guys that are in fantasy leagues that are like, yeah, well, just go out and get the guy. Like it's easy. Well, no, it's not. Yeah. It's really, really hard to make those trades. So, yeah. Well, let's move along to The Montreal Canadiens.
Well, before we moved along, I just wanted to say, Bob, you were the beat reporter for the Sioux Greyhounds, so you've got some connection to the Sioux Greyhounds. I'm a little concerned. Do you think that Kyle Dubas will be calling you to strap on the pads and play net?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
He would make a very good power forward, though. Trust me on that. He's got wicked shot, as I recall. Coming down. You were right shot, Bob.
Right shot.
Yeah, you'd come down the off wing when we played at Don Mills Arena on Tuesdays, and he could freaking wire it, wire it.
In the pantheon of really crappy beer league hockey players, I could shoot a puck.
And then there was the time Rand Simon high sticked him.
And you had to go on
TV that night.
Yeah, and then I'm still not proud of what I did to poor Rand's finger, but that's another story for another day.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I think player safety, I probably would have got about a 6-gamer on that one. Might have been an in-person hearing.
Without doubt.
They wouldn't have done that for a star player, let's be honest. All right, so let's move on to the Montreal Canadiens. And by the way, the statement, I'm not particularly proud of that basically typifies beer league hockey. So I mean, you got it right there in a nutshell. The Montreal Canadiens, it has seemed all year like a foregone conclusion that Ben Sherratt's being traded for a first-round pick from very early on this year. But now you've already mentioned some options for a team looking for that style of defenseman. Do you think that teams are still going to be willing to pay that price come trade deadline?
Yeah, I think so. I think Sherratt is a guy that a lot of teams are interested in. There's multiple teams after him. So I've got to believe that somebody will probably ante up that. Having said that, the point I would make on Montreal with Jeff Gorton and Kent Hughes there now, if you look in, they've already been doing, even though they went to the Stanley Cup final last year, they were doing sort of a rebuild on the fly in Montreal. So Bergevin and when Trevor Timmins was the chief scout there, they were accruing just a ridiculous, in each of the last, 2-3 years at least.
Yeah.
They were going in just locked and loaded with like 10, 11, 12 picks in the draft, in each year's draft. They were having, in some of those years, they had, 2 and 3 and 4 second round picks. So the Canadiens have made a lot of draft picks, and I'm not saying they're not interested in first round picks, but I think they're starting to. I think Kent Hughes, in the very short time that he's been there, has identified. Let's see if we can find some 20, 21, 22-year-old guys who are on the verge of stepping into the lineup as NHL players. And so one of the rumors that we've seen that's been out there everywhere was, Calgary's interested in Ben Sherratt. The name that's out there as a possible return that Montreal wants, but Calgary isn't prepared to give him up, is Jacob Pelletier.
Yeah.
And I can't remember if Pelletier was a first round pick. I seem to think if he wasn't a first, he was a second, but and he's playing in their farm team right now. But I think that's the approach. There's another guy in Minnesota, Jack Mcbain, Andrew McBain's son, who's playing at Boston College right now, and he's potentially can call his own shot in terms of graduating. Just graduate from Boston College this summer and become a free agent later in the summer. Looks like Minnesota will probably trade him. So I could see where a team like Montreal would want get a guy like McBain. They would want to get a guy like Pelletier. And so a Sherratt deal doesn't necessarily have to include a first round pick if the prospect they're getting back is the equivalent of a first round pick and that much closer to playing in the NHL.
Right. So with Jack McBain, I guess the thing is that, you might be tempted to say, well, why not just, you've gone this far, go the distance. But then he's not going to be playing this year. He won't be able to burn a year off his contract this year. He'd have to wait till next year in order to do that. Yeah, so I guess that's kind of where you have to be thinking if you're trying to get Jack McBain, you get him in this year and start things right away.
Yeah, and you get and McBain, from McBain's perspective, he still would be getting to call a shot because no one's going to trade for him unless they know he's going to sign with them, and so exactly. he just gets an early head start on free agency.
Yeah, I don't get the high price for Ben Sherratt myself, Bob. I don't quite understand it. I was talking to Jim Nill last night actually, and they've had their sort of issues with John Klingberg. They're almost certainly going to keep him unless they get a deal that's like out of this world, and then try and re-sign him. He said that the whole trade request was a little bit overblown and that he still wants to stay in Dallas. So I would suspect they're going to hang on to him and see what they can do with him in the playoffs this year. But I mean, for goodness sake, if Ben Sherratt is getting what people are talking about, I can only imagine if Klingberg ever went on the market, what you'd get for that.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think if Dallas was going to trade Klingberg, they would want to get a first round pick, prospect, and probably the old three. Everybody at trade deadline,
the three prongs,
the three pieces. First round pick, which sometimes becomes a second round pick. A high level prospect, which sometimes becomes a mid level prospect, and then some sort of secondary piece, which is sometimes a lower level player, sometimes a lower level prospect, or sometimes a lower level draft pick. But so Klingberg would fetch that kind of thing. But with the Stars being shorthanded and the mono forcing Heiskanen out of the lineup, you're right about that. But in terms of Sherratt, I mean, it's the deadline. People overpay at the deadline. And if you're getting a very specific need, and what have we seen? And I know people will pull out the analytics on a player like Sherratt, or say he doesn't do this or he doesn't do that, and that. But the reality is, there you go. Well, and I hear all that, but every time you look at a Stanley Cup winner, they're loaded with 6'2", 6'3", 6'4", big, strong defensemen who can defend and can offer some physical play. Yep. And whether it's the St. Louis Blues, basically every team that wins the cup, you look at the size of their blue line and you look at the bite that they've got. Yep. And so they're, and let's be honest. I mean, if a team like the Calgary Flames or somebody else who really wants Ben Sherratt, they've got a niche for him on that team where they've already got the puck movers and the guys whose analytics are off the charts. So it gives you a dimension that you feel like you otherwise may be lacking. And if you're desperate to win the cup and win it now, then there are teams that will pay a premium for a player like that.
I'm just not sure you don't get almost that much in a guy like Justin Braun for a lot less.
Yeah, some people might make that argument, and we'll see what
you wouldn't, I guess, but I am.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe right. You may be right. Hey, McKenny, I told you I'm a hockey outsider. I've only watched about a half a dozen games this season.
You're selling yourself short. I know it, Bob. You're still the man. Go ahead, Dylan.
It's funny that you say that because I gave Ken the moniker hockey outsider when we first started this podcast. But moving on, just lastly about the Montreal Canadiens, it seems like almost every name on the team is in trade rumors right now, which almost seems crazy because so many of them have a lot of term left. Like you're hearing Jeff Petrie right now, which is like, I'm not even sure that he's started his next contract yet. So who do you think is actually likely to be moved for this trade deadline, and who do you think is more of an off-season situation?
Well, I think you're right to the extent, Montreal is not in a position where they absolutely have to do anything other than the guys they might want to move that are on expiring contracts. And Petrie still got some term, obviously. And Petrie, he would look favorably on a move, and Montreal would look favorably on getting it done. But, I think some of the teams would want Montreal to retain salary, and they might not be too keen on doing that and that. But if they get the right deal, there's no doubt in my mind they'll move Petrie. Outside of that, I mean, let's look at my list here for a second. We heard some Lehkonen trade rumors for a while, but I think, as a relatively younger player,
and he's been really good lately. He's been really good.
He's been really good.
Yeah.
So unless they knock it out of the park there, in terms of the return they're going to get, there's no pressure to trade a guy like Lehkonen. And after that, I mean, there was, I think, a lot of trade talk or trade rumors on social media for guys like Hoffman and Dvorak and what have you. I'm not convinced that those are deals that we could expect or reasonably think are going to happen by Monday.
Yeah.
The other guy would be that there'll be some demand for just again because every team wants defensemen and guys that can play. Is Kulak would be another guy in Montreal that some teams would be calling on. And again, you're not in a position where you're obliged to trade him, but you can if you want.
Yeah, that's Arturi Mike Bossy Lehkonen right now.
Well, he's been miscast his entire career, in my opinion. And it looks like Marty St. Louis is at least willing to give him the opportunity to exploit his offensive game a little more. I just don't know if he has the set of hands. Maybe he's lost them. Maybe, he's gone so long as a checker, he's lost his hands, but I don't know that he has the hands to be able to finish plays, but I mean, he's certainly got the ability to create those opportunities. Yeah. Whether he cashes in on them is another thing, but yeah.
Yeah, I agree. He was shooting from a lot further out earlier in his career and getting a lot of goals that way. But there's been a joke on Habs Twitter, which is like a sign that goes, "Are you Arturi Lehkonen?" It's got two boxes, yes and no. And there's a bunch of X's around the yes box.
That's pretty good, actually.
The disgruntled fan bases are always the most funny fan bases, right? It's why Leafs Twitter is always so fun as well. And Vancouver Twitter, well, okay, that can just be evil at times.
Yeah.
All right, well, another disgruntled fan base. Nailed it. Edmonton Oilers. As of right now, the Edmonton Oilers are out of the playoffs by points percentage and holding on by a thread with raw points. Every year we hear rumors about McDavid and Draisaitl and how they're going to be disgruntled or they're getting disgruntled. Do you think that the Oilers will be making a big splash at this deadline to prevent that? And if so, who?
Well, I think it's hard to make a big splash for a lot of teams, and especially the Edmonton Oilers. Salary cap situation is really tight there. And I know the fan base has really been upset with their goaltending this year. On the blue line, I don't think, some of the guys, Barry hasn't had a great year, I don't think. And Bouchard's been up and down. And so there's a lot of discontent, and understandably so, especially in those markets, whether it's Buffalo or whether it's Edmonton, or they've just been so bad for so long. And the frustrating part now is that however many years ago it was that they got to the second round and they finally won a first round series, and they lost, I think, to Anaheim in the second round that year.
They did in seven.
In seven. And everybody said, okay, that's it. They've turned the corner. And from here on in, it's going to be a rocket ride on the back of McDavid and Draisaitl and Nurse and all these guys. It's going to be fantastic. Cups galore and bring back the dynasty years. And in fact, what's happened is they've stopped and they've stuttered, and I can't even imagine what would happen if they don't make the playoffs this year. But because I thought, in fairness, I thought some of the moves they made, I thought, that they at the beginning of the year, that was good, getting Warren Fogle and trying to get some credible depth beyond the top 5 or 6 forwards, and it just hasn't panned out that way. And that, so in answer to your question, what do they do? I think they're looking for some help on the blue line. but it's not at the high end by any stretch, and it's more on the depth thing. So I wonder about guys like Middleton, and I wonder about guys like Kulak, and you mentioned Justin Braun and a bunch of other names like that. So I'll be curious to see, how they go about it. There's not a lot of flexibility in terms of the cap. And so I know fans are unhappy and they desperately want something really positive to hang on to. But if the Oilers do something, and I say if they do something at the deadline, it's more likely, my sense of it, is more likely to be a depth move.
Yeah.
And nobody's gonna get too overly excited about a depth move, especially when you're, as you pointed out, points percentage wise, they're not in a playoff spot right now.
I mean, if the Oilers are going to do anything bigger than what you're talking about, Bob, it's got to be money in, money out, right? It just has to. Yeah. And so if you're moving money out, you're going to have to pay a premium for that. So they're not in I don't envy Ken Holland, and I certainly don't envy him if they don't make the playoffs, because I don't know that, I'm a big Ken Holland supporter. I always have been. But I'm not sure that he and Bob Nicholson survive if the Oilers don't make the playoffs. That's purely speculation on my part, but I think it would be tough to justify it.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Kens are notoriously pack animals. They tend to stick together.
That's right.
Yes. And feast over the carcass of the Edmonton Oilers. If Edmonton doesn't make the playoffs, do you think we've reached a point where we would see McDavid or Draisaitl or even a Darnell Nurse, but one of these guys finally, if not ask for a trade, because I know that there's a technical definition behind ask for a trade, but maybe just say, hey, Ken, wouldn't be opposed to moving on?
You got to be really careful how you answer a question like that, because we used to call this getting radioed. I don't want to get. I don't want to get unfiltered.
Yeah.
Dylan mentioned that yesterday. Yeah.
I was going to call the whole segment radioed. I was going to say, Bob McKenzie, welcome to the radioed segment.
See, I don't take much credit for anything in my career, but coming up with the term getting radioed is mine. Like I invented it.
Yeah.
Because I used to do so much radio, and and you do a radio thing, and I learned a couple of things. Number one, sometimes it's just how it's presented. Some of the radio stations you would do the work with, they would take one little clip of what you said and then just put it on social media, and nobody would even listen to the rest of the interview. There was all sorts of context before, context after. They just heard that. That was the very purest definition of being radioed. But here's the other thing is, and this is, people used to say, oh, Bob McKenzie never gives an opinion on anything. And there was a reason why I didn't give an opinion on a lot of things, because the more opinions I gave, the more it was construed, because I was quote unquote the hockey insider and supposed to be the authoritative voice for what is going to be factual and true, and you can trust it. And that if I just give my opinion, somebody will say Bob McKenzie reported that.
Right.
And that actually, that had happened on a number of occasions where I would give an opinion on something that obviously turned out to be wrong. And people would say, well, he reported that so-and-so was getting traded to so-and-so. When I said, no, I think maybe a team like this could use a guy like that. And then people would think, so I got to be really careful, because if I sit here and say to you, yeah, you know what, I think if the Oilers miss the playoffs, Connor McDavid's going to demand a trade for sure. People are going to say,
isolate that, Dylan, in the editing.
Exactly. There are people gotcha. Bob McKenzie just reported that Connor McDavid asked for a trade out of Edmonton. And
I can edit out the I think.
That'll get us on the map.
Yeah. But I know where you live, Kenny, so be careful. But in any case, I would say to that type of question is, I have no idea what Connor McDavid's mindset is, other than I can't even imagine. Put it this way. If the Edmonton Oilers miss the playoffs this year and their fans are really, really, really upset, I'm going to say that Connor McDavid is 97 times more upset than the fans are. That's what I'm going to say. Yeah. And whether there would ever be a point in time where he would say, I've had it here. I'm not going to speculate that. I have no idea.
Right.
I can't get inside Connor McDavid's mind other than to know that those guys, they're two of the very best players in the National Hockey League. And obviously some people would say, and rightfully so, Connor McDavid is the best player in the world. And now you're locked into this long-term deal in Edmonton. And you assumed, like everybody else, that when you lost to Anaheim in 7 games a number of years ago, that the organization had turned the corner and it was let the good times roll. And then here you are, whatever it is, 4 or 5 years later, and you're not in the playoffs, or you make the playoffs and you get bounced in the first round. Mm-hmm. At some point, something's got to give if they don't take a step. And right now, they haven't taken that step. Not to say they won't, but it's a pretty precarious situation, I would think.
So, Bob, speaking of taking a step, you just proved that you have not lost a step because I set you up for the radio segment and you sidestepped that masterfully, but still managed to give an interesting opinion on the subject. Ken, is there anything else about the Edmonton Oilers you want to get into before
I'm a little Edmonton Oilered out these days. Yeah, I'm good. Let's move on to the Tampa Bay Lightning.
So we're moving on to the Tampa Bay Lightning.
This is the last one, Bob, I promise.
Well,
before the last one.
Yeah, okay.
If the Florida Panthers, the Calgary Flames, the Tampa Bay Lightning, the Carolina Hurricanes, and the Colorado Avalanche are essentially the true Stanley Cup contenders, only one of those teams has a first-round pick in this draft, and that is, of course, the Tampa Bay Lightning. How likely do you think it is that Tampa moves that first-round pick? And, of course, if so, who are they targeting to strengthen their team?
I don't think they'll hesitate to trade their first-round pick if they think they can make a deal that's going to make them better. But some teams are tight to the cap. The Tampa Bay Lightning are basically on the cap.
They're hermetically sealed to the cap.
They don't even have cent. There's no, never mind dollars. There's no cents left there. So anything they do, it's dollar in, dollar out. Mm-hmm. So it's Julian Brisebois is going to be looking and seeing, is there any option out there for a player who's better than someone we already have, and that we could lose that player off our roster and bring somebody else in. And so I don't anticipate it being a major acquisition if they do. My colleagues, Pierre and Dregs and CJ at TSN, I believe have mentioned along the line that, Tampa is always looking for, more depth on defense. And, but as I say, if you're getting more depth on defense, then you're losing a piece somewhere else, whether it's on defense or up front. But I think the Jacob Middleton in San Jose, again, Tampa, I think, has been one of the many teams identified in talking to San Jose. And the funny thing about Middleton, you can look it up, Kenny, because you've got a computer in front of you, I'm sure.
I do.
But Middleton, I think he makes less than $1 million, if I'm not mistaken.
He's down there, and I'll look it up.
750 maybe, but so again, that but even on the Tampa Bay Lightning, you still got to make a hard decision on where's that money coming from? What player do we delete if we add a player like that? But I'm sure Julian Brisebois is looking at all his options. Why wouldn't he? To the opportunity to do something that's never been done in the salary cap era, win 3 cups in a row,
Right.
The closest I think we can come to that would be Chicago had 3 and 5 years, maybe
3 and 5. Yeah.
3 and 5. And I always used to say I would qualify the Chicago Blackhawks as a modern day salary cap NHL dynasty.
Sure. Yeah. It's actually 3 and 6, 11, 13, 15. Right. Okay. So 3 and 6, but
3 and 6.
Yeah.
And they didn't even back to back it. And and maybe Tampa already qualifies in the salary cap era of the NHL to win back-to-back cups. Pittsburgh would be the other. Mm-hmm. Maybe they already qualify 2 years back-to-back. But imagine if they can get 3.
Yeah,
that would be that's unprecedented in the salary cap.
Yeah, it really is. Jacob Middleton is at $725. Last year of his deal, he's an RFA with arbitration rights. Interestingly enough,
right? Although he's got the interesting one. He could be a potential Group 6 free agent.
Yeah.
If he plays every game the rest of the year, he won't be a Group 6. But if by any chance he were to not be in the lineup or whatever, he could fall into the Group 6 category.
But the thing with Jacob Middleton, if you do, like, assuming you get him and he stays as a RFA with arbitration rights, that's effectively a guy that's under contract for another year at least, right? Because you're either going to take him to arbitration, he's going to take you to arbitration, or you're going to come up with a deal that's somehow you're going to figure it out, right? So that might actually drive the price up a little bit, I would think.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's if you've got a low cost and cost certainty, and I'd say low cost now because in the short term he's only making $725, and he's obviously due for a significant raise based on the number of minutes that he's played and the profile that he's created for himself in San Jose. But again, he's not going to break the bank as an RFA. That cost certainty is worth a lot. And again, a niche defenseman, a guy that plays really hard, plays an in-your-face game.
Last year in the last couple of years, they've had that third line, of course, right? Now that third line consists of Pat Maroon, Bellemare, and Corey Perry. Mm-hmm. And that's okay. That's okay. But it's not Blake Coleman, Yanni Gourde, and Blake Coleman, Yanni Gourde, and Barclay Goodrow. It's not that. But then again, maybe those guys aren't that either anymore. You know what I mean? So, they've all had actually pretty decent years, and they're all producing sort of where they produced last year. I wonder about that third line, whether they want to make an upgrade there. But again, as you say, Bob, I think with a team like Tampa, it's like, okay, we're gonna go with what we have. We're pretty confident in our abilities. I think Tampa's playing at about 80 to 85% right now. Yeah. I really do. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering if you don't just say, okay, guys, let's just go with what you have and see if we can pull this off again.
Yeah, and plus the other thing, that division is insane. Like when you look at how good the Florida Panthers are this year, up until recently, how well the Toronto Maple Leafs have played. Boston at various times. Boston's had a funny year where at times they've been really bad and at times they've been really good. Yep. But there's still a team that, could really mess around with you in the first round of the playoffs. Yep. And whichever one of those teams, along with Tampa, finishes fourth in division, they get a wild card. What are they looking at? You're either looking at the top team in the conference, or you're going to get like the Carolina Hurricanes. And so the route for Florida, Tampa, Toronto, and Boston to get, never mind to the Cup final, to get to the conference final, it's hard. That's tough sledding, and that's where that might spur you on to try and do everything you could at the deadline, but it might also make you say, you know what, we got to go through Murderer's Row just to get out of the second round. Yeah, I'm gonna be a little bit careful about how much of my future I give up, because if we've learned anything about this game of hockey, it's incredibly random and luck plays an incredible, especially when you're talking about teams that are over the course of 82 games are as close together as those teams are.
Yeah. Why blow your brains out if Toronto blows their brains out and it's like, oh great, we get to play the Lightning in the first round. Yay. That worked out well. So anyway,
you were making fun of us nerds saying stuff like regressing to the mean. I mean, maybe Toronto getting beat by Montreal last year, and then, the regression to the mean would be them beating Tampa this year.
Might be. Yeah.
It all works out to them being a mid-tier team.
It does. Let's get to the, we have one or two listener questions, Bob, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay.
We absolutely do, and I will credit this guy in a little bit, but what is your favorite or funniest trade deadline story, behind the scenes craziness?
Wow, that's a good question.
The time Aaron Ward said, again, let to Boston.
Yeah, this was from Scott at Vibe3Z Hockey on Twitter.
I used to coach him. He's a kid I used to coach.
Actually?
Yeah. He's one of my son's friends.
None of the kids that I coach know that I podcast.
Are you suggesting that the only people who listen to this podcast are people that you coach?
I'm not even sure that there's that many. Hate to waste your time, Bob.
Sorry, Bob. This isn't exactly the career-making opportunity we presented it as when you joined us.
That's okay. I don't need a career. Trust me. There's so many on deadline day. Trying to think. One of my favorite ones was, and this was back very early. This was before deadline took on a life of its own in terms of the network coverage and what have you. So this would have been the old days. Jim Van Horn was still working at TSN.
Oh, geez. Yeah.
And we didn't go on the air until after the trade deadline was over, I think. But we were doing, Jim Van Horn was doing like updates every 15 minutes or 30 minutes into canned programming on TSN. So it would be like bowling or darts or all the stuff that TSN used to run during the day back in the day. So it was getting closer to the deadline. And physically, Jim Van Horn there was a studio where you could think, but it was also one of those ones where the newsroom was the studio. And there were different spots in the newsroom where Jim Van Horn could stand. And there was a staircase that went up, and right by the staircase, he'd stand there. And I had a little cubicle or carrel or whatever they call those office units. And I was sitting there, and I was just off camera, and Jim Van Horn was literally 5 or 6 feet away from me. And I was on the phone talking to somebody, and I was getting information on a trade. And the trade was Vincent Damphousse being traded from the Montreal Canadiens to the San Jose Sharks.
Oh, San Jose. Yeah.
And that. So I'm pretty sure that was it. But anyways, I heard them counting. The floor director was counting down Jim Van Horn, and he had the latest trade or two that had happened over the course of the day. And so they're going 10, 9. And I've got the information, and I'm leaning out, and I always like to say this was the fastest of a trade ever, because I just got the information from one of the teams involved, and hung up the phone, and I leaned out, and I said to Jim Van Horn, Vincent Damphousse, Montreal to San Jose, go with it. And they're literally going 4, 3, and he looks at me and goes, go with it? I said, go with it. And so he comes up and he goes, and it's some trades to report here. Don't have a lot of details right now, but Montreal Canadiens have traded Vincent Damphousse to the San Jose Sharks, and then went into his prepared script of listing off the other trades that happened. So I was sitting there, and all of a sudden my phone rang, and this was probably pre-cell phone, I'm going to guess.
1999, it was.
Is that what it was? It would have been
March
pre-cell
23rd,
phone.
1999, yeah.
Probably pre-cell phone for me, or maybe I had a cell phone. I can't remember. Maybe it was a hard line. But in any case, phone rings, I pick it up, and the person who had given me the information said, hey, because keep in mind, the person called me back like 60 seconds later and said, hey, don't put that out there yet.
Oops.
And I said, ooh.
That's tough.
I said, little late. I said, the train just left the station. I told him what happened. He goes, okay, Fine, thanks for the heads up. Hang it up. That was it. So anyways, the fallout from that one was huge because here's what happened. The Montreal Canadiens were flying from Montreal to Edmonton. They had a game in Edmonton, and they were flying across country. And as it was coming up to the deadline, one of the French language reporters who was on the Montreal Canadian charter back in the days, reporters traveled on the plane with the team.
Yep.
Remember the old, you're probably old enough, Kenny, your hair is gray enough to remember this. If you wanted to make a phone call from a plane, you could pull out this thing with like a sat phone. It was like the biggest phone you've ever seen in your life. And it cost about $1 gazillion.
You run your credit card through it. And
your credit card through it. And it
was like $7 a minute on those things. It was wild.
It was insane. And anyways, this French language reporter called back to his newsroom to see if there was any news or whatever. And they said, Bob McKenzie of TSN just reported Vincent Damphousse has been traded to the San Jose Sharks. Well, all hell broke loose on the plane because it spread like wildfire. And there's Vincent Damphousse sitting up there in the players section of the plane. And it caused a big disturbance because I can always remember Gord Miller was working with me that day. I can always remember Donald Beauchamp, who worked for the Canadiens at the time in media. He called up Gord and he said, this is very bad. This is very bad. This trade
very bad.
Very bad. Mr. Corey is not happy. Ron Corey, of course, was the president of Montreal. Mr. Corey is not happy. He's not happy at all. And there's going to be repercussions for you doing this. And we were like, okay, well, whatever. It's trade deadline day. Too bad. And so poor Vincent Damphousse, I do feel bad for him. He's sitting on the plane. The Canadians all get off the plane. They tell him that he's been traded, and they turn around and he had to go back to Montreal for something. So they basically turned the plane around and they deadheaded the whole plane back with Vincent Damphousse on it to Montreal. But I always used to joke that was like from my ear to my mouth to Jim Van Horn to everything. It all happened in the space of about 45 seconds. So
That's
that was
funny.
That was the most lightning quick trade break ever.
That was March 23rd, 1999. Traded to San Jose for a 5th round pick, which turned out to be the incomparable Marc-Andre Thanel, and a 2nd round pick in 2000. I don't know who they picked with that guy, but yeah. So there you go. That's a good one.
Incomparable to who?
To whom?
Pardon me. Yes.
Yeah.
So we're overtime. Kel Surprise. And do you want to do our last thing, which is the
very
Rolling
last thing?
Stones?
Yeah, the very last thing, the pop culture one. Yeah,
Yes.
Very quickly. Okay, Bob. We always do this with people who come on the show. You're the third one who's come on, so we do this all the time. I don't know if you saw that Rolling Stone recently had a poll of its readers for the best lead singer in rock and roll history. 10 was Kurt Cobain, 9 was Chris Cornell, 8 was John Lennon, 7 was Eddie Vedder, 6 was Roger Daltrey, 5 was Jim Morrison, 4 was Mick Jagger, 3 was Bono, 2 was Freddie Mercury, and 1 was Robert Plant. Your reaction to that?
When you were counting them down, I was waiting to see if Robert Plant was going to be number one.
Yeah.
For pure rock and roll, I don't have a problem with that. And that was also, I'll pick Robert Plant because the very first concert I ever went to was Led Zeppelin at Maple Leaf Gardens.
Okay.
And I was it was the summer between grade 9 and grade 10. It would have been September 4th or September 5th at Maple Leaf Gardens.
Nice.
Me and my buddy Ron Walker were sitting outside my house in Scarborough, and we were having a Lola. I don't know if anybody knows what a Lola is, but it was a big pyramid-shaped snow cone that's in a thing. It's like a big. Look it up, you kids. Look it up. And we were sitting having a Lola. We were sitting there eating.
Okay, wait a second, Bob. Did you pour a little bit of Did you sweeten it up a little bit with some alcohol?
That might have been the first margarita.
No, I think I was, the summer of, so 71. So I would have been, 15 years old? No, not quite there yet. But in any case, it was like 4 or 5 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon. I think it was a Saturday. And what do you want to do? Tonight? I don't know. What do you want to do? And Ron Walker said to me, you want to, I hear Led Zeppelin's playing at Maple Leaf Gardens. Maybe we should go down. And we're like, yeah, okay. So we asked our parents, can we take the bus and subway down to Maple Leaf Gardens? So we went down and we walked up like 5 minutes before the show began, and very naive. And we walked up to the box office and said, do you have any tickets? And they said, yeah, we've got obstructed seat in the first row of the greens at Maple Leaf Gardens, $4.50.
I was going to say $4. Yeah.
$4.50. We're in. So we went in and saw Led Zeppelin. It was my first concert.
Nice. That's good. That's a good yarn.
Yeah.
I know you had a hot take on this, Dylan. So go ahead.
My hot take is the guy that's really missing from this list. So first of all, Jim Morrison. I love the Doors. I love Jim Morrison, but he's got to be. People put attributes to him that just should not exist. He's the American poet because.
Yeah.
Oh, you don't disagree?
No, I don't disagree. You can put him lower on the list.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't think he's that great of a singer. He was a great front man. He was a great whatever, but I don't think that he was that great of a lyricist. I'm sorry, but Ride the Snake. The snake is long, 7 miles is not the work of Edgar Allan Poe. How about we put it that way? Anyways, the person that I would put on this list that is not on this list would be David Wilcox.
Interesting choice. I used to see David Wilcox a lot when I was in university because he was doing the university tours then.
I think he still is.
Yeah, he probably still is. But he would be just out and out, just shit canned by the end of the concert. Like he'd be drunk. He'd just be stumbling around the stage, but he was brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay, you're both wrong with this. It's Annie Lennox, period. And I'm not taking any questions on this. Somebody said on Twitter when this list came out, they said, boy, this seems like a rather exclusive list. And I don't know why. I can't seem to put my penis on it, which I thought was pretty funny. So it's Annie Lennox for me.
Janis Joplin not being on the list is also just a
but I don't
crime
think she was
against
she was on a front person for any group. So
yeah, okay.
Anyways,
fair enough.
Anyways, we're wasting Bob's time here. Let's wrap this up.
Bob, thank you so much for being on. Last words, remind us again when Bobby Margaritas are coming out in the LCBO.
It's any day now. But certainly before the end of the month, it should be in about 160 LCBOs. And once we get into April, it'll be even more than that. So go give it a try. If you like it, great. If you don't, too bad.
And my last question about the margaritas going into the LCBO, was this part of one of Doug Ford's many promises to try to get himself reelected, was putting Bobby Margarita into the LCBO?
I don't think so.
Well, Bob, listen, I appreciate you taking the time. We took up a lot of your time, and I appreciate everything you've always done for me, and I appreciate you doing this too.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on, guys. Take care.
Yeah. Thanks, Bob. Take care.